Hey everyone, here's the second video, and in case you didn't notice, I am inside Bonnycastle, and maybe you can see the chalkboard behind me. I'll talk more about what's on the chalkboard in a little bit, but this next video is designed to help you do a close reading of a poem. And what I mean by that is just reading a poem closely for what you think are its dominant features. And I have a lot of characteristics and features of the poem listed on the PowerPoint slide for this course. But what I want to talk about is how you can read a poem closely and how that will lead to discussion and analysis of a poem in class. So obviously there's maybe some overlap with the workshop video that I just did in terms of content, but the poems that we'll be doing close readings of are primarily from the anthology and also the two other textbooks for the class. So let me just say a couple things. The first one that I want to the first characteristic I'd like to address is narrative, and that is most poems, no matter how abstract, are telling a story, right? What is the story of the poem? A lot of times people think, poetry, I have no idea what's going on, it's abstract, I can't make any sense of it. The reason for that is a lot of poems tend to be non-linear, and they use figurative language. So, for example, figurative language is abstract language that describes a concrete action. So there are lots of techniques that are deployed within a poem that make it a poem much more different than conventional prose. So, for example, a lot of poems use metaphor. Metaphor is an extended comparison between two dissimilar things. And poems rely heavily on metaphor, and that kind of abstraction can make it difficult to begin talking about a poem. Another kind of abstraction that's maybe a little simpler is symbolism, and that is, a tree can stand for life, right? And that kind of direct one-to-one symbolism is sometimes that's a good place to begin in a poem, but a lot of poems aren't necessarily that aren't that straightforward. I also want people to be comfortable with your kind of lack of understanding or understanding of a poem. I think that sometimes first readings of poems, even though they may be inaccurate or not precise, I would hesitate to call them wrong, although you certainly can be wrong. But sometimes that kind of lack of a clear understanding is a really important jumping off point. And there's more to say about that in person. So let's move on a little bit. One of the things to look at in a poem is perhaps tension or irony. So tension can, sometimes most poems have, are about more than one thing, and those two things sometimes are, oppose each other. And what you can do is ask yourself, okay, is there tension in a poem between something, right? What's the conflict? And you can comment on that. One of the things that I'd like to do to kind of wrap up this video is talk, and this will lead into the next one, is to talk about form and content. And that is that free verse which is not rhymed poetry, but still has a lot of the traditional characteristics of traditional rhymed poetry, is still a form nonetheless, and form often relates to content. So what we can also do is, say, in free verse, talk about the significance of, say, a stanza break, or there being maybe more than one stanza. So in a formal poem, you might say, okay, well, what's the significance of, the couplet in a sonnet, right? Or what does it mean that a sonnet which is written in iambic pentameter maybe has loose iambic pentameter in some lines. So there's a relationship between form and content that I'll talk about a little bit in video number 3, which is about traditional poetry.